Good morning, everybody. How are you all doing? You all right? Hey. So welcome to the BFI Future Film Festival. Welcome back if you were here yesterday. Hands up if you were here yesterday. Oh, great, excellent. Good to see you and good to see you back again. And if it's your first day today, a warm welcome to you. I'm Noel, this is Evelyn. And today, and for the next 2 days, we've got some amazing events to inspire you as filmmakers and to give you insights into the industry to help you think about the kinds of careers you might want to have in film and TV.
But before we kick off today with our keynote speech, we just have a couple of things that we want to tell you about. First of all, if you need anything at all while you're here, any information, any questions, do pop down to the festival ticket desk downstairs or don't grab them, but ask one of our lovely volunteers. They're wearing please don't manhandle the volunteers. They're wearing very vibrant t-shirts. You can't miss them. They'll be able to help you out with anything that you need. Also, if you do want to swap any tickets around, if you decide, actually, I don't want to go to this at 3 o'clock, I want to go to this instead, they have spare tickets at the desk downstairs, so you can go swap around if you want to.
Yeah, and you've probably also noticed in the foyer we've got a 360 Igloo brought to you by our friends from Igloo Vision. They've got 360 films playing throughout the festival and also some brilliant drop-in talks. So please do check them out. Go and say hello. Have a look at some of those films in the breaks and stuff. That's the time to have a little look at some of those.
And for the other films that we're screening during the festival, you can actually go and watch them all downstairs in our backstage area. We have some computers set up down there where you can watch the short films that we're screening and also chat to the team from Soho Editors who can give you some hints and tips on editing, and you can have a go on their software as well. There's also tea and coffee and biscuits down there if you get peckish.
Most importantly. Actually, not most importantly. Most importantly, our headline partners, Lacey, are in the backstage area. Go and say hello to those guys. They're here throughout the festival. Can I just get a quick show of hands? Who here is a filmmaker or wants to be a filmmaker? That's lovely. That's exactly what I wanted to see. Okay, can I get a show of hands of who wants to win a too big dock Lacey hard drive worth over 500 quid? Put your hands up if you want to win one of those.
Excellent. It's a good competition.
Good stuff. It is a good competition. But you can't be lazy. What you've got to do is, what we want you to do is we want you to take clips of the festival, up to 15 seconds, and then at the end of the festival, we're going to put all of those clips together and produce like a montage video of the festival from your eyes. So like, while you're here, as your filmmakers, take some videos and then go and see our friends Lacey down at the backstage area. Drop off your clips. They'll put them onto the storage there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to pick the best clips at the end of the festival, and they're going to win a too big dock hard drive. If you're too lazy to do that, you can just pop down and see them, give them your details, and then every day we're also giving away a rugged hard drive. We're just going to pick out a name at random at our networking drinks at 5 p.m. And if you've given them your details, you could be in with a chance of winning a rugged hard drive.
Yeah, do stick around for the networking drinks, not only for the rugged hard drive, but also for a chance to chat, network with all the other filmmakers in this room, and have a drink on us. If you're over 18, you will need a blue wristband, so do pop back down to the ticket desk if you haven't got one yet. If you want a beer,
you'll need proof of age.
You'll need proof of age.
You'll need proof of age. Yeah, we don't want any underage drinking going on at all. But you know, everybody who is over 18, you know, have a drink on us, and everybody who's under 18, have a juice on us. But as long as you network, that's the most important thing. Okay, so before we hand over to some of our other amazing colleagues, just want to say a really quick thank you to the Reuben Foundation, who've just come on board as our sponsors of the festival and our year-round programme, and a massive thanks to all of the events partners who've helped us put together such an extensive programme of events. And finally, please do help us spread the word by posting on your social media about the festival, hashtag Future Film Festival. You know, get on your Bebo, your MySpace. I couldn't resist it. Sorry, I did it again. I know, old man. No, get on your social media, hashtag Future Film Festival. Help spread the word, spread a bit of love.
Yeah, and so just before we introduce your keynote speaker, I'd like to bring to the stage, and please give a big round of applause for Anna Bogatskaya, who's going to introduce the keynote and tell you a bit about the BFI's Woman with a Movie Camera strand. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm the Film and Events Programmer at the BFI South Bank here, and the curator of the Women with a Movie Camera Strand and Summit, which is an ongoing celebration that we do here at the BFI of women's contribution to cinema, which is sadly still often underappreciated, unsung. So my job is to every month curate an event or work with partners and organizations to present women and women's work in cinema. It usually goes along with discussions or a party or some additional kind of event. Sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're really intriguing and moving, and sometimes it's just downright weird, like the one that we're doing tomorrow, which is a selection of horror shorts made by women. But my favorite unofficial job title is as the president of the Georgia Parris fan club. Georgia's been a friend for a number of years and also someone who is an incredible voice in filmmaking. Since I sneakily took a look at one of her short films when I shouldn't have, when we were working in the same office, I've been a fan of her voice in film and how she's used dance and movement in ways that I've never seen before in narrative films. And she's made an amazing and incredibly poignant array of short films that I've had the privilege to screen at different festivals and at different events. And she made her debut feature, Mari, which premiered at the BFI London Film Festival last year, which was an extraordinary experience and an extraordinary piece of work. And I believe it's also screening later today. So don't kid yourself and just stay around for that screening, because it will be 100% worth it. But to share her insight and her journey, please give a super, super warm welcome and remember the name to Georgia Parris.
Hi. Thank you for that, Anna. Sorry, very nice. So it's a pretty big deal for me to be here today talking to you in this particular building, as this is where my journey as a filmmaker began. The BFI has played a huge part in my life over the last 10 years, and it started back in 2008 when I was 25 and trying to be an actress, and it was going quite miserably. But as you know, I had all the enthusiasm, so I signed up to volunteer at the BFI London Film Festival to broaden my knowledge of independent film, which I have to say was pretty poor. I basically thought that what was on at my local Streatham Odeum was cinema. And so for the next couple of years, I was still attempting the acting thing, doing small fringe theatre productions, but I kept having experiences that made me question why I was doing it. The nail in the coffin for the acting career was at Latitude Festival. I was a founding member of a very idealistic and earnest theatre company, and like every new theatre company, we were trying to do something different. We worked for over a year and a half creating a very special first play as a company. And as well as acting in it, I designed the poster, oversaw the costumes and the set, and I think these were the first few signs that perhaps I wanted a bit more control than just acting. God knows how, but for the premiere of our very quiet, observational fringe piece of theatre, we managed to get the midnight slot in the theatre tent, which is basically a huge circus arena at Latitude, on Saturday night, going on straight after the Royal Shakespeare Company. So, nervous as hell, we trot on after the RSC, who have just performed a major production with all the bells and whistles, and have got the mostly drunk crowd all geared up and very overexcited. So the lights go up and we begin, and only half of our mics work. And the ones that do are set far too loud, like the voice of God. And then the other one thing was one of the major props wasn't on stage, so we had to improvise the whole scene around it without it actually being there. And then all the lighting cues went out of sync, and we ended up doing one scene in complete darkness. And by this point, people started leaving in their droves. And I remember at one point, one person actually shouting out, "This is shit." And just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, one of the audience members in the front row collapsed. Some kind of heart attack as a result of our bad show, I presume. So as soon as we got backstage, half of the company burst into tears, and my poor director, he couldn't speak, he was so traumatised, and he took a bottle of vodka and he spent the night in the car park on his own. I, on the other hand, found the whole thing quite amusing. For it to go that badly wrong, I just kind of had to laugh. I went off into the festival and actually had a really great night, but it did strike me the next day as we recovered, why hadn't I reacted in a similar way to the rest of the cast? Why didn't I care more? And this leads me to quite an important point about how much you care about what you're doing. So, without wanting to sound too pessimistic, if you're choosing a career in film which has pretty much zero structure, very little stability or financial incentives, and more rejection than you can ever imagine, you've got to be doing it because you really, really love it. I can't stress this enough. And my passion for film hasn't dwindled over all these years and after all the rejection, so that's what's kept me going. And now I fully understand why my director sank a bottle of vodka after that disastrous show. I'd probably do the very same thing if that happened with one of my films. Anyway, so I gradually started to realise that I was enjoying the process of creating theatre more than the actually performing in it. And then in 2010, when I was back working at the London Film Festival, which is something I ended up doing for 6 years, but as the volunteer coordinator, I loved it that much, I watched a film called Archipelago by Joanna Hogg. And she did a Q&A afterwards, and I realised it was the first time I'd ever seen a female director before, like in the flesh. And she'd created something beautiful that really spoke to me artistically. I desperately wish I'd made that film, and it was at that point that the kind of light bulb moment happened, and I realised that I should be behind the camera and not in front. And so I began my journey of becoming a director at the ripe old age of 27. And that experience of listening to Joanna Hogg talk about her film was really important to me because it clearly showed me why we have to keep working towards a more diverse and inclusive industry so that we can see people that look like us in positions that we can aspire to. Visibility is absolutely key. We're all watching film and TV, so we should all be making it. All I'd ever really seen was white, usually middle-class men representing the industry that I wanted to be a part of, and this didn't sit very well, and it still doesn't. But thankfully, I genuinely do think things are beginning to change, and just looking at this room, I can see that that's clear. So, if I was going to give this directing thing a shot in my late 20s, I knew I needed to give it everything. So I quit my job as a part-time receptionist and any acting commitments and left London and its many distractions to live with my uncle who had a spare room in his house in Paris. I couldn't afford film school, so I just set about teaching myself. I read books, I wrote terrible short films, I went to see a lot of cinema, photography exhibitions, and then I decided to make my first film. I just wanted to shoot something, but I had no friends in Paris, and I certainly had no people to collaborate with, so I just used my old Sony Mini DV camcorder and decided to shoot it myself. I ended up making a documentary about my uncle's amateur but very charming fanfare jazz band, and this experience was perfect for a first attempt at filmmaking. I learnt so much about myself and what it was I was drawn to as a director, and then the editing process taught me about the art of structure and storytelling. So it was a really beneficial exercise. I highly recommend making a documentary as one of your first films. So I stayed in Paris for about 6 months and eventually headed back to London to start trying to establish myself in the industry. To earn a living, I worked as an on-set runner in music videos and commercials. Doing this alongside the London Film Festival every year basically became my film education. I met amazing crew members on the commercials that helped me make my films. And then from working at the festival, I met lots of people that worked in programming and on the distribution side, so I was starting to get a really rounded sort of understanding of the industry. And after some months of working as a runner, I've completely lost my place. Having all this paper, it's very distressing. Anyway, after some months as working as a runner, I decided that I needed to make something proper. And I still didn't have a narrative story I wanted to tell. But what I did have was a sister who was a fashion designer and a love for contemporary dance, a medium that I'd been wanting to explore in cinema for some time. My sister's dresses are made of large silk scarves sewn together that look incredible in movement, so it just made sense for me to film them and use dance. I met a DP, which is a director of photography, on a national lottery commercial I was a runner on. We got chatting, I told him about my idea, and he said he'd help me. I was totally unaware that he was actually quite a respected DP in the industry. And basically because of him, I got an entire crew that was seriously good. I think the film gods were looking down on me on that one. So I turned up on the first day of the shoot totally overwhelmed by how professional it all was, and especially compared to my documentary experience. But I was the happiest I'd been in a long time, and I knew that this sort of career switch I'd made was the best decision I ever could have made. I remember the DIT, which is the person that uploads all the footage from the camera memory cards, asking what frame rate I wanted to shoot the film at. And this was in front of quite a lot of the crew that were setting up, and I had no idea what he meant. And I didn't want everyone else to know that. So I told him that, well, I'd actually been thinking about this a lot, and could we sit down and talk about it properly? I successfully managed to pull him aside, out of earshot, and and then admitted to him that I didn't have a clue what he was talking about. So basically, there's definitely something to be said about you blagging it until you make it. But I also believe that honesty goes a long way too. Now I'm a bit more experienced, it's pretty obvious to me when someone doesn't really know what they're doing, and I'd much rather they tell me they were struggling so that we can work it out rather than lots of mistakes being made and blame being passed around. Anyway, this fashion film did quite well for me at on festival circuits, and it gave me the confidence to go a bit bigger and finally make my first drama short. I started writing with the director of the theatre company that I told you about, Latitude, and we managed to raise £10,000 on Kickstarter and set about making a totally overambitious short film with multiple locations, far too many extras, and my first attempt at directing actors, and one of those was a 6-year-old child. So a little silly on reflection, but I was really passionate about the subject matter I was exploring, which is about a woman in her 60s starting to feel invisible to the world. And well, this is what helped me through the stress, knowing I was making something that I felt was important. And I really feel that when you're being ambitious, you have to believe wholeheartedly in what you're doing. This is going to be one of your greatest assets as a director or whatever field you choose to go into the industry. It's infectious seeing someone light up when they start talking about what they love. It makes you want to be a part of it. And when I was trying to gather crew to work on my films, usually for free, many of the people that did come on board said they did it because they could see how much I cared and how determined I was to get it made. Go away from a meeting having made an impression that you're going to get this film made with or without them. So off the back of the short, I got asked to direct a film with some third-year drama students for their sort of final showcase. And this was a really interesting experience for me because it didn't go very well. I was working with a writer who was great, but it became obvious we had very different styles, so we couldn't agree on the script to the point where she eventually left the project and didn't want her name on it. So to salvage the film, I took over the writing of it in collaboration with the students, but it was quite late in the day. Our intentions with the film were good, but overall the vision was totally lost. Unexpectedly, this film became one of my biggest learning curves. It's so important to fail. As hard as it is to stomach, it's what's going to teach you the most about who you are as a filmmaker. Anyway, so by this point, I was 30, 31 and still working as a runner, and it was really starting to get to me because a lot of my mates were starting to do interesting things with their careers, and I was still making tea and coffee for a living. The breaking point was a Tiny Temper music video. Tiny Temper was on a horse. The horse shat everywhere during a take, and the horse handler forgot her shovel. I got called in to clean it up. And the only thing I had was a large piece of Corex, which is basically a big piece of black plastic that you use to protect flooring. So I folded it in two, kind of fashioning some kind of shovel action, and proceeded to clear up Tiny Temper's horse's poo whilst the entire film crew watched and laughed. After that, I felt it was probably time I took a leap of faith and moved things along. I got given one of those self-help style books from my boyfriend called You Are a Badass. It's very American, but I remember the moment reading it when it talked about knowing your own worth and making choices to start living the life you actually want to instead of just dreaming about it. At this point, if anybody asked me what I did for a job, I said I was a runner, never a director. And even though I was making quite a lot of short films regularly, I knew I had to start believing I was a director, and this meant quitting running and going full-time writing and directing, which felt risky, especially financially, but I knew it's what I had to do. So I made the leap and started writing my first feature film called Mari, a family drama using contemporary dance to explore the narrative. I set myself a script deadline through a talent development scheme called Microwave, run by Film London, the BFI and the BBC. It's a competition that gives you £150,000 to make your first feature film. And the deadline for entries was in July, so that's what I worked towards. And when you have to self-motivate, it's vital to give yourself deadlines. This is something I still do, even if they're made up. Mari was the first attempt I'd ever had at writing a feature film and the first time I'd ever written something on my own and of this scale. I had no formal training on how to write a screenplay, but I used the internet, read and studied other scripts, and gathered friends that I trusted to give them drafts for feedback, and just got on with it the best I could. I submitted the script knowing that I wouldn't hear about interviews until October. So in the meantime, I decided to make a short film called Abandon, based on the feature to help with the development, knowing that if I got to interview stage, I could show how I was intending to use dance to explore the narrative, as I knew this is going to be one of the trickiest things to sell. To be honest, I didn't have much faith that I was actually going to get onto microwave. By this point, over the last 6 odd years, I'd applied to pretty much every scheme and grant going and been rejected from pretty much all of them. But to my utter amazement, my producer, Emma Duffy, and I got on to the microwave scheme along with 11 other teams. And what followed was 5 months of intense development, script writing and interviews to get through to the final rounds. And miraculously found out that I won the competition in March of 2017. And so 2017, 2018 just sort of merged into one crazy blur. I basically went underground, quit any social life, parties, alcohol, everything, because I knew I had to stay focused and give it all I had. And I strongly believe that if you're a director of something with lots of people working for you, it's essential that you stay on top of everything and you give your best to everyone. You're the one that has to set the bar, so set it high. It really does make all the difference. And we shot Mari over 16 days in February last year. In fact, we wrapped the shoot exactly 1 year today. And amazingly, it went on to have its world premiere in October at the London Film Festival, exactly 10 years after I began here as a volunteer. So, to end, I just want to share a few key points that I've learnt along the way that I often have to remind myself of. Firstly, don't compare yourselves to others. Avoid comparison like the plague. I've got a little post-it note that I've sellotaped underneath my computer at home that says, chase the dream, not the competition. When you're having to self-motivate and it's not going very well, and then you check your Instagram and your Twitter and you see all the brilliant things that everyone else is doing, basically, for me, it's death to my day. It's a total waste of time getting caught up in all of that, but sadly, I still do. So what I would say is recognise your weaknesses and help yourself out. When I'm feeling doubtful or uninspired, I delete Instagram and Twitter from my phone. For me to do my best work, I need to shut out all the voices and the constant feed of everybody else's life and get on with my own. Secondly, stay curious and never get complacent about refining your voice and what it is that you want to say. Nearly every story has already been told, so how are you going to tell the same stories in a new way? As individuals, you all have your own voice, your own view of the world, so dig deep to work out what that unique thing about you is. What's your perspective? What makes you feel? What's your culture? What represents you? You know, go and make those films. And finally, it's a cliche, but it's so, so true. You've got to do this for the journey and not the end result. I spent 10 years in this very building watching films, wishing that one day I'd be up on stage introducing my film at the London Film Festival. I feel extraordinarily lucky to say this has now happened. But what I learned from that experience was when I got there, it didn't quite feel how I thought it was going to feel. The expectation was simply too high. So a lesson learned for me is that you absolutely have to enjoy the journey of getting to your dream as much, if not more, than the dream itself. The making of Mari was the best experience of my life. It surpassed all my expectations. So all I'd say is don't wait. Start making films any way you can. Be resilient and enjoy the process because, as you've heard, it can take quite some time. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Georgia, for that really, really inspiring, funny and poignant keynote. Thank you very much. Okay, so it's time to go to your first sessions at 11 o'clock. So head on out. If you're in here for the next event, if you could also just step outside for a few minutes while we get set up, I'd be really, really grateful. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks.